El pasado julio coincidimos con la escritora Kameron Hurley en el Festival Celsius 232 de Avilés. En España la conocemos por ser la autora detrás del aclamado libro de ensayos La Revolución Feminista Geek, publicado en español por Runas. Pero como escritora de ciencia ficción y fantasía, tiene una trayectoria de más de 10 años. Tiene 2 sagas literarias, docenas de relatos cortos y una novela, Las estrellas son legión, que es la única que, por el momento, podemos disfrutar en castellano. Le preguntamos por su infancia, por el acoso en las redes sociales, por las comunidades de escritoras y por el juego.
Yeah, I was one of those kids in grade school who had the glasses, and I had braces with we call it headgear, where it goes all the way around, and it's terrible. It was just awful. And I read and I wrote a lot, and people really had issues with that. I had people stealing my stuff and running off with it. It was not a great time. Luckily, though, when I was in high school, I found the high school drama or theater troupe. And they were all kind of geeks like me, like they liked geeky things, and they liked to read and they liked to write and all of that stuff. So I kind of found my people for the first time, and that was really nice. Again, I didn't feel so lonely and like there was something wrong with me. One of the things too is, I grew up in a very rural area where we had a lot of land. And it was just me and my imagination. So I was very much used to writing and reading and doing those solitary pursuits, and I didn't really come into the geek community until much later. So that's kind of, how I got my start. I started writing stories based on some of the adventures I would have on my own on the land. I had a very active imagination as a child. My mother likes to tell the story where I would turn on the water in the bathtub, and then I would lock the door from the inside and close it and because my friends were taking a bath, and so my dad would have to unscrew the lock, and turn off the water before it flooded the house. She just said, "You are a very imaginative child." And that's just always how I've been. I always love to have adventures and things in my head, and that has been a really good thing to start writing. So, there are many different things that I mean with that. There are certain expectations that people have of writers and anyone who is a kind of public person, and some of my other writing colleagues, I've talked to them about this, where you want to maintain this level of being hopeful and not too depressing. My agent will actually email me when she feels I am being too negative and be like, "You are coming across, you need to be hopeful, Kameron, you're too negative." And I say, well, but sometimes the world is negative. But it is true. If your stuff is dark or you seem very depressed, and you seem like, again, you have health issues or something like that. I do know authors who have lost out on work because they talk publicly about having health problems, and so people are afraid to give them work because they won't get it done. Instead of just asking them, "Hey, do you think you can do this?" And that is a concern, that we can't be entirely honest in the ways that we communicate with our fans and with our audiences. A lot of time I will wait after I've gone through a mental or physical health thing, and then I will be like, "Oh, I was down for a while, but now things are wonderful." And then, of course, also, there has been, just this sort of events that you decide to go to, events that you decide not to go to, which are more important to your career than you would think, because those interpersonal connections are still very important. There are many, many good writers, but when anthologists and people who select writers for things, again, Marvel, all these places, Star Wars, when they think about writers, they tend to ask people that they've already worked with. And so if you've met those people, that you're the first person that they think of. If you have not met those people, they may not think of you as quickly. And that's always a very difficult kind of gambling game. It's like, yes, you can have a career without that, but it was really helpful to make in-person connections. It's difficult because, as with, again, a lot of business, a lot of business places that we end up going into as women, people assume things about you. They assume, they assume all the time that I write either YA or romance because I'm a woman. And I say, well, I write, adult science fiction and fantasy where people chop off other people's heads and kick them in the face. And that's always kind of shocking to people. And of course, we also have this thing where when I was very young, when I was 20, and I knew I wanted to go into science fiction and fantasy, I had someone say, well, you really need to read the classics. Because when you go to conventions, you go to business things, they're going to say, have you read Asimov? Have you read Heinlein? Again, that whole testing. Have you really read the classics? Do you really know what you're doing? And it was very helpful for me, even if I said, well, yes, I've read Heinlein and I don't like it, and this is why. Yes, I've read Alfred Bester and I like Alfred Bester in this way. I could have those conversations and all of a sudden, oh yes, you've read The Old Men, so that's all right. That's all right. We will put up with you. So there is that as well. It's verifying that you take the writing profession seriously, not just any writing, but science fiction in particular. So there's that. And especially as I was a young woman coming up, I don't see it as much now because I'm more well established. But there were certainly people in the industry who preyed on young women writers, who would, offer them all sorts of opportunities and then use that as an excuse to grab them and do all those things that, again, just like any other business, any other thing that we deal with, we have our own. Some of the ones that I know of, most of which have been kind of pushed out of those convention spaces, but there are new ones like coming up all the time, and I've been hearing from younger women about some of who those people are, and so everyone's working to get rid of them, but it's something that happens, and it's something you have to be aware of, and again, it's really hard as you're young and you're female to say, the way this writer is treating me, even though they are influential, is not okay with me, and so I'm going to cut off all contact with them. I've had to do that with a writer, and that's hard. That's a difficult decision, because it's is this behavior bad enough that I really want to, again, not get any more opportunities, or can I put up with it, right? Just like at work, at my day job, can I put up with this a little longer? That's hard. That's hard even for me, right? Knowing, and it's easier now because I don't need those opportunities as much, but I see it, for younger women coming in, newer writers, I can see them also doing that balancing act, well, he only yells at me and says inappropriate things a few times. He doesn't grab me. Maybe that's okay. So those are hard things, as with, again, any profession, so. I think most of the responsibilities I think that I have are just as a writer generally, which are, I was told very early in my career by another writer that writers need to take responsibility for the images that they put on the page. I recognize that everything that I do can be seen as in context with everything else. So I think that I do certainly have a responsibility to take responsibility for anything that I put onto the page that again, is contributing to a problematic narrative that is, again, we talk about, is contributing to the acceptance of violence against women or the acceptance of, homophobia or anything like that. If I put that stuff in there, I become part of that narrative. So it's very important to me to write a different narrative, to create something that is different and outside of those problematic contexts. I want to reprogram people. I feel we've all have this terrible programming that we have, that has been absorbed in us as we have gotten older, and it takes our entire adult lives to sort of reprogram ourselves away from all those bad things that we've been brought up to think are okay. And so that's where I see myself. I see myself as helping people become the best versions of themselves that they can be by inviting them to think critically about their world and to think critically about the things that they believe to be normal or universal. That to me is my ultimate responsibility. But that's me. That's the responsibility that I have given to myself. So. What I would like to see, and I think what all of us would like to see, is conversations that are more inclusive. That when you actually sit down and say, how to be a filmmaker, it's 3 women and 3 men, and so you get the full perspective of experiences. That's what we would like to see. Unfortunately, that's not what we do see. We end up seeing 6 guys on a panel like that, how to be a filmmaker, and they speak to the experiences that they have had as men, usually all as white men, and they miss a lot of things. I was having a very fascinating conversation with another woman who was working in comics and in games and things, and we had a lot of similar stories about harassment and how to break through and get men to take issues seriously when we talk about women characters and what franchises are doing to some women characters and how we change things. And it was a conversation that you wouldn't see happening on an all-male panel of how to be a filmmaker, because of course those aren't how to be a filmmaker. It's how to be a male filmmaker, and they just don't label them that way. So unfortunately, I feel that they're needed in some ways, because there are in some ways that again, being a female writer is different than being a male writer. I would like to see more inclusive panel where it's just, here's how it is, and we have many different voices. We don't have that. That's where I want to see that change happening. But until that change happens, we do need to have those extra events just for women that say, yes, and there are these extra things. All these other things can apply, but it's not going to be as easy as it is for those guys. It's just not. I would like to tell everyone that, as a woman, there are not specific things that you have to deal with, but there are. Yeah, that has been an incredibly valuable part of social media, is all of us finding each other and going, oh, it's not just me. I'm not crazy. And that's feminism, right? Is women realizing, oh, it's not just me who sees all of these things and the ways I'm treated differently. All of these other women experience it too. Oh, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. And it is that you get a very good sense. Again, I love to talk to older women writers and creators, because who've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, and go, well, I'm still here, and I'm like, okay, I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. And that's really important, especially as you're coming up. You need to have people ahead of you who have been through it all. And again, it was even worse. I'm working every generation to make it better. But just hearing their stories just reminds me, okay, we are making a little progress, and that it can be done, that we can outlast them. That really is like the game, is like just outlast the crappy men writers. Like, just outlast them. And that's like my goal, is like, I'll be a grandmaster. I will outlast you all. So yeah, it's incredibly powerful to have a community. And again, because it one woman saying something is not nearly as powerful as 300 women, right, saying the same thing. Sadly, we should just be able to speak, and it's like, oh, a human is speaking, and a human has had an experience. Unfortunately, it's not that way. So yes, it's very much been helpful to have a much larger community working together. Yeah, it is exhausting. I take a lot of care of myself. I realize I don't need to see any of those horrible things like online and stuff. So on Twitter, I actually have this, it has very robust settings now where I can say I don't want to see anything from people who don't follow me and who don't have approved email addresses. So a lot of things I don't see anymore, yay. And also then my assistant screens all my emails. So if I get hate mail, it goes in a separate folder. And if there's nothing like really serious, it just gets deleted. So I don't see a lot of things anymore. I don't have comments on my blog. And speaking of the thing about panels, it's also very useful when even there's just 2 women together on a panel. Like if you have 4 guys and 1 woman, it can be difficult because you're trying to speak for all women. Whereas if there's like 2 women and even 4 men, or 2 women and 2 men, it's easier to kind of have each other's backs and to back each other up. And that's very helpful as well. And then again, taking rests. A lot of people take a break from the social media and all that stuff and are like, I'm just going to write for 30 days and I'm not going to pay any attention to reviews or to people on the internet or any of that. And that's also very useful. And again, I also remind myself that a lot of the haters, are not my audience. They're not my fans. They're not the people I'm writing for. So why do I care what they say? I don't. I don't care. You don't read my books. I don't care. These books are not for you. So some of it is that as well. It's just reminding myself how little that actually matters to my actual career. Is it worth it for me? Yes, because the alternative is to shut up and to not have a career, and then they win. And that's not satisfying to me.
But you also say in your book
book that you know a lot of writers that they quit or they have to change their names to a neutral or male name in order to publish.
Yeah. Do I think it's right is a different question. No. I am really angry at these social media channels who do not take any responsibility whatsoever for stuff posted on their platform. I give this example a lot. If I were to run a tavern, a bar, and someone came into my bar and was spitting on and yelling at patrons, I would kick them out because I value all of my patrons and they don't deserve to be spit on in my establishment. But that is not, these social media networks happen so quickly and the badness, right, came up so quickly that they don't know what to do. And they feel, is it censorship? And I'm like, well, no, you're not a government. You're a private bar and people are acting badly in your bar. What are you going to do for your other patrons? Because eventually what happens is the nice patrons leave and then all you're left with is people yelling and spitting at each other in a bar. And who wants that? Apparently social media places. So no, it's awful and I am really ticked off about it. But in the meantime, until that is fixed, I have to have a career, right? And it kills me when every time a woman leaves the internet or a woman leaves writing altogether, I feel for them. And I understand it every time where I'm just like, man, how much longer, could I put up with this, which is why I quit sometimes Twitter. I'm like, I'm going to take a break for 30 days because I want to be here as long as possible. But I get it. I get it. It's tiring after a while. And I do talk to young women when they are first starting out, hey, don't read reviews. Here's how to manage your social media. Mur Lafferty is coming out she wrote a Star Wars novel, a solo novelization. And I said, okay, Mur, here's how you fix your Twitter settings. She's like, I already did that because you told me to a couple months ago, Cameron. I said, good. So it's just you protect yourself as much as possible. And if these media companies are going to step up, we have to protect each other. So do it. We are waiting for you. It's so great because Anne Leckie's book, Ancillary Justice, had come out and it did so well. I feel that that's the reason Stars or Legion did well, is because it's a very radical book, but because we had Anne Leckie saying, okay, we're just going to use she pronouns, even though there were also male characters. And then I'm like, no male character. It's like that one up of the next thing. And we're paving the way, right? Every writer that comes now, you can say, well, Stars or Legion did really well. So here's this weird all-female, crazy, or non-binary, thing. You can do all sorts of great stuff now because you can point to these other books that are successful. And I would just say, again, remember the audience you're writing for. Don't listen to anyone else. Write what you want to write because life is short. And screw everybody else.